Long before the continents were mapped with the lines that now define nations, before ships crossed the Atlantic in search of new lands, the Americas were home to peoples of extraordinary diversity. Their stories, interwoven with the land and shaped by generations of wisdom, remain etched in the rivers, forests, and mountains of the New World. Among these many stories is a lesser-told narrative, a narrative of the Black Indigenous People of America, whose unique heritage is a testament to resilience, adaptation, and the power of cultural intermixing. To truly understand the journey of Black Indigenous people in America, we must begin with a broader view of the Americas before European contact. The land stretching from the Arctic Circle to the southernmost tips of the Andes was a mosaic of nations, languages, and customs. Societies such as the Olmec, Maya, Mississippian, and Taino fostered advanced civilizations, thriving trade networks, and complex social systems. Among some Native American communities, the presence of darker-skinned peoples was noted in their oral histories, traditions, and even, in rare instances, their artwork. Some scholars and tradition keepers argue that transoceanic contact between Africa and the Americas may have occurred prior to Columbus, with suggested evidence ranging from similarities in art and culture to ancient African scripts found in pre-Columbian artifacts. The Olmec colossal heads, carved in Mexico over 2,000 years ago, have often been cited for their African features, a subject of considerable debate, yet one that raises questions about ancient migrations and interactions. Whatever the extent of such early contact, it is clear that after European explorers arrived on American shores, the world changed forever for both the indigenous peoples and the millions of Africans who would be forcibly brought to these lands. The transatlantic slave trade, spanning centuries, would become one of the darkest chapters in human history. Between the 16th and 19th centuries, millions of Africans were captured, enslaved, and transported across the Atlantic, with a significant proportion destined for the Caribbean, Central, and South America, and what is now the United States. As these Africans arrived in new lands, they encountered Native American nations in myriad ways. Sometimes they were forced laborers, toiling together on colonial plantations. In other places, enslaved Africans fled the brutality of slavery and sought refuge among indigenous communities, who at times welcomed them, resulting in bonds forged through shared struggles for freedom. In these places, Black indigenous identities were born. Through intermarriage, alliances, and daily life, Africans and Native Americans exchanged knowledge, spiritual beliefs, languages, and traditions, creating new, syncretic cultures that bore the strengths of both worlds. These unions gave rise to communities now recognized as Black Indians, Afro-Indigenous, or by the names of their specific tribes and nations. The story of the Seminole people illustrates this rich interweaving. In the swamps and forests of Florida, the Seminole Nation became a haven for Africans escaping enslavement. Maroons, people of African descent who had escaped slavery, lived alongside Seminoles, and over time, their lives, struggles, and hopes became entwined. Together, they resisted slave catchers and much of the relentless pressure of colonial expansion. The Black Seminoles and Seminole people would stand together in the Seminole Wars, defending their sovereignty and freedom against American forces. Elsewhere, similar stories unfolded. In the Southeast, the Cherokee, Creek, Choctaw, and Chickasaw encountered Africans through slavery and, at times, through free association. As the 5 civilized tribes adopted certain European customs, some also adopted the practice of enslaving Africans. Yet, within these communities, relationships could be complex. Bonds of genuine kinship sometimes developed, and descendants survived to the present day, identifying as both African American and Native American. In the Northeast, the Narragansett, Pequot, and Wampanoag nations included people of African and indigenous descent, especially in the 18th and 19th centuries as freed and escaped slaves sought safe harbor in these communities. In the West and Southwest, notable black indigenous communities formed among the Shoshone, Apache, and other nations, reflecting the intricate tapestry of migration and alliance. As centuries passed, the U.S. expanded westward, bringing devastation and forced removals to countless Native American communities. During the Trail of Tears, members of black indigenous descent were part of the thousands of lives upended by forced marches to new lands in Indian Territory, what we now call Oklahoma. The histories of these intertwined peoples were often deliberately obscured by colonial narratives, records written by victors intent on division rather than unity. Native Americans were encouraged to identify with whiteness as a way to gain political advantage during the rise of Jim Crow, or to distance themselves from African ancestry due to anti-black prejudice. Meanwhile, many enslaved and freed people of African descent clung to the traditions and family ties formed in Native communities. In the 20th century, some tribal rolls, lists of recognized tribal citizens, excluded those with African heritage, a legacy of discriminatory policies that still shapes who is counted as Native in America today. Despite these pressures, black indigenous communities have survived. They have maintained ancestral knowledge, family ties, and enduring pride in both their African and Native American roots. Their songs, stories, and rituals bear the marks of hybrid identities. Their faces recall generations of resistance, adaptation, and hope. Today, efforts to reclaim and celebrate black indigenous identities are reshaping the way history is told and lived. Across the United States, people rediscover family stories long whispered or hidden. Scholars trace forgotten alliances, dances, words, and music, reassembling the puzzle pieces of a past too often erased. Powwows and family gatherings welcome those of mixed ancestry. Legal battles over citizenship and recognition face the tensions inherited from centuries of separation. In Oklahoma, descendants of the original freedmen, black people enslaved by the Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, Creek, and Seminole, seek equal recognition and rights within their tribes, challenging systems built to divide. In Louisiana and the Carolinas, the Gullah and Geechee communities maintain language and customs that draw from West African and indigenous traditions alike. In coastal communities of New England, black and native families trace lineages to the first arrivals and the First Nations, honoring the ancestors who survived colonization together. The art, literature, and activism of black indigenous people resonate with themes of belonging, memory, and resistance. They offer a more complete vision of American history, one that acknowledges the full spectrum of our shared heritage. The works of writers and poets such as Tiffany Midge, Joshua Whitehead, and Tia Miles illuminate the complexity of identity and the enduring power of family, place, and purpose. This history is also one of resilience. Black indigenous people survived enslavement, genocide, forced migration, and the erasure of their stories. They endured the weight of laws and systems designed to limit their possibilities, but they also thrived, adapting and transforming cultures even in the most adverse conditions. Their survival is a testament not only to their ancestors, but to the human capacity for transformation and endurance. Yet, the struggle for recognition and healing continues. The legacy of racism and disenfranchisement means that many black indigenous people face twofold discrimination: marginalized by wider society for their blackness, and excluded by Native communities for their African ancestry. Their stories often remain at the margins, but awareness is steadily growing. Community leaders, artists, and organizers work to heal wounds, seeking justice and inclusion. They remind us that the Americas have always been places of movement and mixing, where identity is not a simple matter of blood quantum or pedigree, but of belonging, participation, and shared destiny. For young black indigenous people today, reclaiming their roots is an act of courage and affirmation. It is a declaration that all parts of their ancestry deserve honor. Education, both formal and informal, is empowering the next generation to honor storytellers, elders, and traditions, while forging new ways forward. In classrooms and museums, the history of black indigenous Americans is finally being included in the national conversation. Films, books, and visual art highlight the beauty and complexity of blended heritage. Cultural exchanges, powwows, Juneteenth celebrations, African American festivals invite all to witness the ways in which these identities are not contradictions, but sources of unique strength and creativity. Science, too, is offering new tools. Advances in genetics allow individuals to trace ancestries long obscured. DNA testing reveals roots spread across continents and centuries, confirming links long kept secret by fear or forgotten by time. Still, identity is more than DNA. It is built on stories, relationship, and participation. In rural communities, urban neighborhoods, reservations, and cities, Black Indigenous people are organizing for sovereignty, justice, health, and cultural renewal. They stand at the intersection of movements for racial equality, indigenous rights, environmental justice, and spiritual sovereignty. The teachings passed down through generations encourage respect for the land, community, and ancestors. These teachings guide renewed efforts to preserve languages, revive dances and songs, and protect sacred sites. Across the country, Indigenous and African American traditions of land stewardship are being relearned as part of the broader struggle to address climate change, food insecurity, and environmental devastation. In spiritual life, Black Indigenous people find ways to honor the Creator, the spirits, and the ancestors in myriad forms, combining the rituals of the sweat lodge with the rhythms of the drum, the prayers of Christian faith with the deep reverence for earth and sky inherited from their indigenous and African roots. The histories and cultures of the Black Indigenous peoples stretch far beyond the borders of the United States. In the Caribbean, Maroon societies, formed by runaway African slaves and indigenous people, fought colonial powers and thrived in the mountains and forests for centuries. In Brazil, the Quilombolas continue traditions shaped by both African and native ancestors. In Central America and along every coast, Afro-Indigenous communities persist, each with its own unique stories of origin, migration, and resistance. Throughout the Americas, Black Indigenous communities are challenging the old narratives, insisting that their histories and futures matter. With each new project, mural, book, and gathering, the veil of erasure lifts. Teachers revise syllabi. Families reunite branches long separated by slavery, removal, and assimilation. Nations rethink the meaning of belonging and citizenship in the 21st century. In popular culture, the influence of Black Indigenous heritage can be traced in music, dance, clothing, language, and art. Hip-hop and jazz echo the call and response traditions of both West Africa and Native America. Beadwork, basket weaving, and carving blend techniques and designs from worlds once thought separate. In politics, Black Indigenous leaders are increasingly visible. They speak truth to power, calling for reparations, restoration, and the full inclusion of all their people's children, reminding America that its promise of freedom and justice cannot be fulfilled while any of its descendants are left out. Their journey is unfinished, but it is a journey marked by extraordinary courage, invention, and solidarity. By seeking justice, preserving culture, and telling the full truth of the past, Black Indigenous people are shaping a brighter and more inclusive future. In the end, the story of Black Indigenous people of America is the story of America itself, a land forged by the meeting of many worlds, by struggle and hope, by the search for belonging and the fight for dignity. Their legacy challenges us to see the beauty and strength in diversity, to acknowledge the painful histories that shape our present, and to join together in building a world where every story is honored and every voice can be heard. Their ancestors walk with them still, in the drumbeat, in the wind, in the laughter of children, and the prayers whispered to the dawn. The Black Indigenous peoples of America remind us that history lives not only in the past, but in the choices we make today, and in the dreams we dare to hold for tomorrow. Their stories weren't carved into stone. They were whispered into the wind, passed through generations, and buried beneath the weight of time. But today, we've uncovered a piece of that truth, together. If this documentary opened your eyes or stirred something deeper within you, don't let it be the end. Subscribe to Tales of Black for more untold histories and voices long silenced. Tap the to stay connected. Like the video to show your support. Leave a comment. Your voice adds power to the conversation. And if you believe someone else should hear this, share it. Let their story travel farther than silence ever could. Tales of Black, where the forgotten are remembered.